In a world where darkness cloaks itself in glittering robes, where dazzling masks are used to hide emptiness, we see narcissists walking through life with calculated smiles. They build palaces out of lies, raise ivory towers out of power games, and believe themselves to be invincible. Yet, somewhere in the crowd, there is a presence that unsettles them, a figure whose mere appearance can make even their strongest defenses begin to crack: the super empath. What makes the super empath extraordinary is not some innate power, nor shining armor, nor a legendary sword. On the contrary, they were once the most fragile souls, the most breakable hearts. They were deceived, manipulated, thrown into the abyss of despair, where light seemed nothing but a distant memory. And yet, in that abyss, something strange happened. Instead of vanishing, they were reborn. From wounds, they drew strength. From tears, they forged willpower. They ceased to be victims. They became the nightmare the narcissist can never escape. The narcissist survives through control. They need puppets who bow their heads, submissive souls to feed their fragile ego. But in front of a super empath, every trick suddenly loses its power. Because the super empath no longer reacts like an ordinary victim. They do not fear, nor do they harbor resentment. Instead, they watch quietly, they understand, they illuminate. That silence, that steady presence, becomes the first crack in the narcissist's mask of power. There is a profound paradox. The brighter the light, the more clearly darkness is exposed. And the super empath is that light. They do not need to shout to prove themselves right. They do not need to fight to claim victory. Their presence alone, in their calmness, in their piercing gaze, in the way they establish boundaries that cannot be crossed, is enough to make the narcissist feel stripped bare under daylight. In today's journey, we will climb each step to understand why the super empath is the greatest fear of the narcissist. We will explore: how can a heart once tormented find the strength to be reborn? Why does their intuition become the invisible blade that cuts through every disguise? What makes their silence sharper than 1,000 accusations? And how do their boundaries transform into an unbreachable fortress, leaving the narcissist in despair at their own helplessness? This is not just the story of those who have been wounded. This is the story of transformation, of the human ability to turn pain into wisdom, fragility into strength. It is a reminder that within each of us, no matter how many times we have fallen, no matter how often we have felt not enough, there lies a power waiting to be awakened. Part 1. The journey from victim to rebirth. No one is born a super empath. Before stepping into the role of illuminator of the dark, they were once ordinary human beings, hearts soft and tender, carrying simple dreams of love and peace. Yet that very ordinariness made them irresistible prey in the eyes of the narcissist. For narcissists are always drawn to open hearts, to souls willing to give, and to those sensitive enough to listen, to understand, to love unconditionally. And so the tragedy begins. The super empath, still unaware of their true power, often falls into the arms of a narcissist as if by fate. At first, there is the shower of roses, the idealization phase. Sweet words, relentless attention, the intoxicating sense of being worshipped, these make them believe they have found a rare love. But soon, behind the dazzling glow, darkness reveals itself. Disdain, devaluation, psychological games, the cold silence wielded like an invisible punishment. In those moments, the empath's heart shatters piece by piece. The pain is not only from betrayal, but also from the belief that they have failed to heal another soul. Empaths believe deeply in healing. When they see someone wounded, they want to embrace, to protect, to make things whole again. And the narcissist exploits this very longing. Every attempt by the super empath to fix the relationship only tightens the narcissist's control. Thus, they spiral deeper into a cycle with no exit. Yet there is something remarkable. Even when dragged to the depths of despair, the super empath holds a rare ability, the capacity to endure and to learn from their pain. Unlike others who may remain trapped in bitterness forever, the super empath begins to ask questions. Why did I accept this abuse? Why did I forget my own worth? And most importantly, am I truly as weak as the narcissist wants me to believe? These questions open the door to rebirth. At first, awakening comes slowly, like faint rays piercing a heavy fog. It may be the day they realize they no longer need to respond to the narcissist's silent treatment. It may be a night of sobbing alone in a dark room when suddenly a small inner voice rises. Enough. From that moment, they begin to see that they no longer wish to live inside this endless loop. What sets the super empath apart is that they do not escape fueled by rage. They transmute pain into wisdom. They reflect not to blame themselves, but to understand human nature more deeply. They come to see that the narcissist never had power because they were weak, but because their kindness and compassion were exploited. And once this truth becomes clear, their sensitivity, once a wound, becomes an unbreakable source of strength. The rebirth of the super empath is like ancient alchemy. Crude metal must endure the furnace, be melted, hammered, reshaped before it can shine as a polished blade. In the same way, their heart must pass through betrayal, humiliation, and disorientation until, in that fire, resilience is forged. When they emerge, they are no longer who they once were. They carry within them a new energy, both gentle and razor-sharp. Rebirth does not mean forgetting the pain. On the contrary, they carry the memory as part of their soul. But memory is no longer chains. It has become wings. It reminds them that they once fell and they rose again. It reminds them that their tears were not wasted, for from them a new strength was born. The super empath does not need revenge. They do not return to prove they are stronger. Their true power comes from refusing to be defined by the past. They choose to move forward, to build a new life with themselves at the center, not the manipulator. And this very choice terrifies the narcissist. Because once the super empath is no longer dependent on validation, no longer afraid of rejection, every manipulative tactic loses its effect. The journey from victim to rebirth is also a journey into the deepest philosophy of existence. Pain is not an ending, but a doorway to growth. Without betrayal, they would never have learned to trust their intuition. Without lonely nights, they would never have discovered the strength of silence. Without being dragged to the bottom, they would never have known the eternal light dwelling within. Looking back, the super empath no longer resents the narcissist. They understand that the narcissist was merely a catalyst, a harsh teacher, pushing them closer to themselves. They do not excuse toxicity, nor forgive in denial. They simply acknowledge, I learned from the darkness, and now I choose the light. And so, from the ashes of a destructive relationship, the super empath rises as a new flame. No one can extinguish this fire, for it is not fed by pride, but by painful experiences transmuted into living wisdom. This journey, ultimately, is not only the story of the super empath. It is the story of anyone who has been tormented, who has felt inadequate, who has believed they lost everything. It is the reminder that you never truly fall as long as you still hunger to rise. Pain is not the end. It is fertile ground where a new self can be sown. And in that new growth, a super empath is born. Part 2. The Narcissist. Architect of illusion. To understand why the presence of a super empath makes the narcissist tremble, we must first confront the essence of the narcissist. They are not merely selfish or arrogant. They are architects of illusion, builders of entire false worlds to shield their fragile ego and escape the brutal truth of who they are. From the outside, narcissists often seem admirable. They know when to smile, what sweet words to say, how to wear the costume of success, intellect, or even compassion. But what you see is only theater. Behind the dazzling lights lies a hollow void, where a small self quivers with fear. Fear of not being recognized, fear of worthlessness, fear that if the truth is revealed, no one will stay. So, they construct elaborate false architecture around themselves. Imagine a sandcastle built on wet ground, From afar, it may look grand and imposing, but one small wave, and it collapses. Likewise, the narcissist's ego survives only as long as the illusion of control is maintained. Every lie, every manipulation, every act of devaluing others is another fragile brick in their crumbling castle. This explains why they constantly crave supply from the outside. Without admiration, attention, or submission, the false self begins to crack. Thus, they manipulate, smear, diminish others not simply to dominate, but to cover the inner truth they never feel enough. From a philosophical lens, the narcissist embodies the paradox of humanity. The more fear inside, the greater the performance outside. The smaller they feel, the bigger the mask they must wear. But truth always waits patiently, and the super empath becomes the mirror reflecting that truth, leaving the narcissist with no place to hide. It must be emphasized. Narcissists are not evil simply because they want to hurt others. Their cruelty is instrumental. It is the only strategy they know to survive. They tear you down not because you are less, but because only when you are small do they feel big. They make you doubt yourself not because you are wrong, but because only when you are confused do they feel secure. Their entire deception reveals one painful truth. They are utterly dependent on others to sustain their false self. But what happens when someone no longer plays by those rules? When a super empath, after years of suffering, suddenly stands tall and refuses to react to the narcissist's script? When they no longer offer anger for the narcissist to feed on, nor fear to be controlled, no compromise to be exploited, the entire castle of illusion begins to quake. This is why the super empath is the narcissist's nightmare, not because they attack, but because they render the narcissist's tactics useless. Every power game becomes meaningless once the other has awakened, and this is the narcissist's greatest fear: truth. The truth that their power was never real, the truth that their prideful self is only a mask, the truth that without someone reacting, they are nothing. The philosopher Kierkegaard once said, "Despair is the sickness of the self when it refuses to be itself." The narcissist embodies this despair. They dare not face their true self, so they create a substitute identity. But this identity can never be satisfied because it is false. Like an empty vessel, the more you pour in, the louder it echoes. And when confronted by the super empath, that hollow echo is revealed, forcing them to hear their own emptiness. Observe how the narcissist reacts. When the mask cracks, they may lash out, desperate to restore power. They may smear you, seek new supply, or stage fresh dramas. But deep down, they know they are fighting something inevitable. Truth always wins. In this picture, the super empath is not the destroyer of the narcissist. They are simply the embodiment of light, and light automatically exposes darkness. When the super empath enters, no accusations are necessary. Deception trembles on its own. Their existence alone proves that castles of sand cannot withstand waves of truth. This offers us a deeper lesson. All power built on deception is fragile. However grand it may appear, however long it may last, the moment a ray of truth shines, it will collapse. The narcissist, in their desperation to conceal reality, builds entire systems of lies. But truth does not need to fight it, only needs to be. And the super empath, through intuition, silence, and unshakable boundaries, is the embodiment of that presence. Thus, in calling the narcissist an architect of illusion, we are not only describing them, we are also reflecting a shadow within ourselves. For who among us has never worn a mask to hide fear? Who has not tried to prove worth by making another small? The only difference lies in degree and in choice. The narcissist chooses to make illusion their way of life. The super empath chooses to confront, to heal, and to rise. And that is the decisive turning point. Part 3. First power. Piercing intuition. Among all the gifts a super empath possesses, intuition is the sharpest invisible blade. It is not knowledge learned from books, nor a skill gained from outward training. Intuition is the inner whisper, the ability to see the essence of things, even when all outward evidence seems to say the opposite. Narcissists fear the super empath's intuition because it cannot be manipulated. You can deceive a mind with words, enchant the ears with promises, and mislead the eyes with carefully staged performances. But you cannot hide from intuition the sense that rises from the depth of the soul. A super empath doesn't just hear what you say. They feel the intention behind your words. They don't just see your smile. They sense the emptiness concealed behind your eyes. That is why, while many are swept up by the narcissist's dazzling theatrics, the super empath often detects a misalignment, something that doesn't quite fit. This intuition does not come from nowhere. It is the result of a painful journey. Past wounds have refined their senses to a rare subtlety. Each time they were deceived, they learned to distinguish truth from illusion. Each time they were punished with silence, they learned to listen to the spaces between words. Each time they were manipulated, they learned to feel the energy that truly radiates from a person. All of it converges into an almost supernatural ability to see through the mask. Imagine a narcissist entering a room with a charming smile and lavish compliments. Most people will be impressed, even captivated. But the super empath senses a vague tension, like a sour note in a symphony. They do not rush to judgment or accusation. They simply observe and let intuition lead. And intuition rarely fails. What terrifies the narcissist most is the calmness in the super empath's gaze. No accusations, no shouting, just a steady look is enough to make them feel exposed. In that gaze, they know the act has lost its power. The feeling of being seen is, for a narcissist, like standing naked in a crowded square. Eastern philosophy has a saying, "When the heart is still, the mind is clear." When a person is no longer swept away by fear or judgment, they can see more clearly than anyone. The super empath embodies this principle. Their lived pain has taught them to release illusions, so they are no longer easily fooled. And that clarity of mind has honed their intuition into a weapon. There is an important distinction. The super empath's intuition is not for attack, but for protection. They don't use it to expose everyone around them or to prove they are superior. They use it as a compass to keep themselves from being dragged into toxic spirals. When intuition says something is off, they don't rush to argue, they choose distance. And within that distance, the narcissist loses their chance to manipulate. Piercing intuition also lets them read inner contradictions. The super empath senses the fear buried inside the narcissist, the insecurity hidden behind arrogance. They know that beneath the mocking laugh is a trembling soul. This makes them both resolute and free of hatred. They see the truth, and the truth alone is enough to steady them without retaliation. In everyday life, this intuition appears in simple forms. A friend tells a story that sounds plausible, yet something feels wrong. A colleague smiles, yet you feel envy behind it. A relative speaks of love, yet you hear control in every word. The super empath does not dismiss these signals. They don't need airtight evidence to trust that their soul is sounding the alarm. And when they trust their intuition, they no longer fall so easily into the narcissist's traps. Narcissists despise this. Their entire strategy depends on not being seen. They need darkness for deception to multiply. They need naivety for their power games to continue. But before a super empath, everything becomes transparent. And the most painful part is this. The super empath doesn't need to do anything. Their mere presence is enough to make the narcissist falter. Here lies a deep philosophical lesson. Truth does not need to shout. It only needs to be present. The super empath's intuition is the doorway through which truth enters. It is neither loud nor showy, yet it is strong enough to shatter every disguise. And when that happens, the narcissist is left with a raw truth they cannot bear. Piercing intuition, this is the first power, and it serves as a warning to the narcissist. The game has changed. No more easy deceit, no more effortless control. Once the super empath listens to the call of their own soul, they become a lamp that cannot be extinguished. Part 4, Second Power, the authority of silence. If intuition is the invisible blade that slices through disguises, silence is the vast mirror that reflects the narcissist's true nature. This is not the silence of surrender, nor the silence of fear. It is a particular kind of silence, the silence of power. Narcissists live on reactions. Every time they attack with words, they wait for your anger. Every time they create distance with a silent treatment, they wait for your panic and attempts to make peace. Every time they spread lies, they wait for your frantic explanations. For them, your reaction is a source of energy, an acknowledgement that they control your emotions. But what happens when that reaction no longer comes? What happens when, in the face of their dramatic performances, you respond only with calm silence? The entire game collapses. Super empaths have fallen into that trap before. They begged, argued, sobbed to be understood, exhausted themselves explaining. But after many stumbles, they discovered a truth. Every reaction is a gift to the narcissist. A single tear, a rushed defense, a burst of anger, each becomes a weapon in the manipulator's hand. And so they learn to take the gift back. Powerful silence does not come from helplessness. It comes from awakening. It is like a warrior who once relied on swinging a sword, now understanding that standing still can make the enemy tire themselves out. When the super empath chooses silence, they stop playing the power game. They refuse to let the narcissist conduct the rhythm of their feelings. They set their own rhythm, the rhythm of peace. The narcissist cannot bear this silence. In silence, they no longer feel important. In silence, they are no longer the center. In silence, they are forced to face themselves, their greatest fear. So they will try every tactic to break it: provocation, rage, tears, even playing the victim. But if the super empath remains steady, the narcissist eventually runs out of steam. This silence carries a profound philosophical meaning. It is a refusal to keep feeding the illusion. When you don't react, you speak a wordless language. I no longer allow you to define me. It is not a sentence, but a way of living. And that declaration is more powerful than any speech, because it flows from action, presence, and energy. Picture an ordinary scene. The narcissist hurls barbs at a family dinner, waiting for you to react so they can blame you. Instead, you quietly eat, offer a faint smile, then leave the table. No argument, no tears, only stillness. To outsiders, it may seem trivial. To the narcissist, it is a bitter defeat, perhaps the first time they failed to control you. Crucially, this silence is not avoidance. It is not you muzzling yourself out of fear. It is a conscious choice, a decision not to pour energy into a game that only breeds exhaustion. It is the affirmation, I have the right to keep my peace. In many spiritual traditions, silence is seen as a supreme power, because silence is not merely the absence of sound, it is the presence of the deepest self. In the super empath's powerful silence, there is self-mastery, self-respect, and the light of truth. That is what sends the narcissist into panic. There is nothing left to cling to, no crack to slip through. Then something remarkable occurs. The super empath's silence not only protects them, but becomes an invitation for others to learn. When one person chooses silence over reaction, they create a new space, a space where truth can resound without words. Those around them feel the difference. Not the silence of resignation, but the silence of authority. The narcissist may shout, perform, and scheme, but in silence, all of it is meaningless. Truth needs no defense, and light does not argue with darkness, it simply shines. And the authority of silence is its purest form. Thus, when we speak of the super empath's second power, we are not merely describing a coping tactic. We are describing a way of being, a state in which you are no longer swept away by emotional games, but stand firm at the still center of your own peace. Once attained, that state turns you into the narcissist's unending nightmare. Part 5. Third power. The inviolable boundary. If intuition is the invisible sword, and silence the great mirror, then boundaries are the unshakable fortress of the super empath. These are not cold walls built to avoid life. but clear lines forged from blood, tears, and wisdom. They are the result of a long journey where the super empath learned a priceless lesson. Kindness never means unconditional sacrifice. The narcissist thrives on violation. They cross your boundaries subtly at first, small steps, before escalating into a full-scale invasion. They demand your time, your energy, your dreams, and ultimately your dignity. They turn every no into a yes, every limit into a joke. And because empaths are so accustomed to giving, many allow it to continue until they no longer recognize who they are. But the super empath is different. After tasting destruction, they understand that without boundaries, there is no freedom. They learn to say no, not out of hatred, but out of love for themselves. And in the narcissist's world, built entirely on control, that single no thunders like lightning ripping through their false sky. The super empath's boundary is not a flimsy fence that can be broken by sweet words or angry outbursts. It is built upon deep awareness that their worth is not measured by pleasing others. They once sacrificed, compromised, and lost themselves and vowed never again. Thus, their boundary becomes a living declaration of the right to exist. Picture this: a colleague who habitually unloads tasks on you, taking credit for your work. In the past, you might have agreed, afraid that refusal would upset them. But the super empath no longer yields. They say calmly, "I will only do my share. I cannot take over yours." No anger, no drawn-out argument. A simple, steady sentence that erects a wall no manipulation can cross. The narcissist hears such words and feels rage boil inside. They are used to twisting others with guilt, used to turning kindness into a tool. But now, before the super empath, the game fails. Accusations, tears, cold silences, none of it works. The boundary stands, like a fortress that will not fall. What unsettles the narcissist most is that the super empath's boundary is not born of hatred. It is not an angry threat that might weaken over time. It is a quiet truth, an unshakable principle. That is why it never erodes. The more the narcissist tests it, the more powerless they feel. From a philosophical perspective, boundaries prove a person has reclaimed sovereignty over themselves. For the one without boundaries has handed the keys of their being into someone else's hands. When the super empath sets a boundary, they not only protect themselves from violation, they also declare, "I know who I am. I know what deserves entry into my life and what does not." This is a level of maturity the narcissist can never reach, because they live by intrusion, never by respect. Some may ask, are boundaries selfish? The super empath answers with their very presence, no, they are the truest form of love for oneself. Without protecting your own peace, you can never have the strength to love others in a healthy way. Boundaries are the highest act of love because they keep you whole, unbroken, and free from being dissolved in someone else's manipulation. In daily life, boundaries appear in simple acts, not replying to late-night messages just to soothe a demanding person, not agreeing to meet out of fear of being labeled cold, not staying in conversations laced with devaluation and toxicity. Each small act is a brick in the fortress, and from that fortress, the super empath lives their own life, unmanipulated, unruled. Standing before someone with firm boundaries, the narcissist feels disarmed. Their power depends on blurring boundaries, turning love into submission, kindness into servitude, care into control. When those tactics fail, they are left hollow. And nothing terrifies the narcissist more than facing that emptiness. Boundaries, the super empath's third power, send a message to every victim once trapped in manipulation. You have the right to say enough. No shouting, no revenge, just a single no spoken from an awakened heart. That alone is enough to make the darkness tremble. Part 6, fourth power, revealing the truth. If intuition lets the super empath see through, silence disables the game, and boundaries keep them whole, then the ability to reveal the truth is the ultimate fire that terrifies the narcissist. Narcissists survive on deception. They are like nocturnal creatures that can only live in darkness, where truth is obscured. They need others to believe the story they invent, that they are the victim, the hero, the center of the universe. Every relationship, every conversation, every performance is staged to shield a painful truth. They are emptier and more fragile than anyone knows. But the super empath appears like sunlight piercing the dark. They don't need to shout, nor to expose with bitterness. With honest presence alone, the layers of disguise begin to fall. The narcissist knows that in front of a super empath, the mask loses its power, and that feels like being stripped bare in a crowd. Here's the key. The super empath reveals truth, not for revenge. They don't need to prove themselves right, nor to tear the narcissist down to reclaim personal justice. They act from a higher motive, compassion, and integrity. They understand that if falsehoods aren't exposed, innocent people will keep getting hurt, so they speak up. Not to be a hero, but to stop the spiral of manipulation from swallowing more souls. Imagine a scene. In a friend group, a narcissist begins spinning a false story to smear someone. People go quiet, some believe, some doubt. The super empath gently asks one question. What day did that happen again? I remember we were somewhere else that day. No accusation, no aggression. Yet that single question is enough to make the story collapse like a paper castle. Truth doesn't need to be loud. It only needs to arrive on time. And this is what drives the narcissist mad. The super empath refuses to play by their rules. No blame games, no character assassination, no clinging to hatred. They let truth speak for itself. When that happens, the narcissist has nothing to attack. Panic sets in as the mask falls. Ancient Western wisdom says, light does not argue with darkness. It simply shines and darkness disappears. The super empath is that light. When they show up with honesty, lies feel out of place. When they live their values, fakery looks small. Their power isn't in confrontation, it's in not needing to confront. Truth carries its own force. Importantly, the super empath's truth-telling turns inward as well as outward. They dare to face their own shadow, their wounds, the vulnerabilities that once made them easy to control. Because they have faced themselves, they are not afraid of the darkness in others. This is what the narcissist will never have. While they run from themselves, the super empath turns to meet their own depth. Thus, when a super empath reveals the truth, it is not condemnation, it is liberation. Liberation for themselves and for those ensnared in the web of manipulation. Many, upon hearing truth spoken aloud, awaken. So I'm not crazy. My felt sense was right. The truth was always there, I just hadn't dared to trust it. The super empath becomes the voice many longed for, but could not utter. This pushes the narcissist into their darkest corner. They lose control not only over the super empath, but over others too. For once truth is revealed, it spreads like fire. It cannot be put out. And in that light, all theater dissolves. Practically, the super empath's truth-telling is profoundly useful. It might be the moment you protect a colleague unfairly blamed. It might be refusing to let a narcissistic relative keep spreading lies in the family. It might be saying, I don't agree when someone tries to impose on you. Small actions, added together, create a tremendous force, the power of truth. And in these actions, the narcissist realizes the super empath is no longer a victim. They've become a wind of change. Not loud, not violent, but strong enough to sweep away years of dust and deceit. Revealing the truth, this is the fourth power, the sacred flame of the super empath's journey. It not only makes narcissists tremble, it rekindles hope in all who've been manipulated, that darkness is not invincible, and that light only needs to appear to prevail. Part 7. The Power of Emotional Detachment. One of the super empath's quietest, yet most devastating powers against the narcissist is emotional detachment. This is not coldness, numbness, or indifference to pain. On the contrary, they remain deeply compassionate and attuned to inner life, their own and others. The difference is this: they have learned not to let other people's emotions define their own. Narcissists operate by blending. They mix love with control, care with manipulation, praise with subtle devaluation. Above all, they blend their emotions with yours. When they're angry, they make you feel guilty. When they're insecure, they plant in you the duty to soothe them. When they're disappointed, they load the weight onto your shoulders. Bit by bit, you lose your inner boundaries until you no longer know which feelings are yours and which are merely their projection. This is the vortex that exhausts so many victims. But after a long road of hurt and healing, the super empath masters the art of emotional separation. They realize your emotions are yours, mine are mine. Simple to say, hard to live without rare spiritual strength and clarity. Picture the narcissist raging, unloading blame. Everything is your fault. If you were different, things would be fine. Most people fall straight into the trap, asking, is it my fault? What did I do wrong? The super empath does something else. They breathe, stay calm, and let the narcissist storm belong to the narcissist. They may reply, I hear you, but I won't take responsibility for feelings I didn't cause. It's an invisible boundary, immensely powerful. With emotional detachment, the super empath stops following the narcissist's script. No more sleepless nights over the silent treatment. No more endless arguments to prove innocence. No more gnawing guilt deliberately planted. Instead, they keep a quiet inner space where they can observe without being swept away. This throws the narcissist into panic. Their entire power depends on controlling other people's emotions. They need your anger to label you too sensitive. They need your pleading to feel dominant. They need your guilt to keep you compliant. But when you stop oscillating, when your I is no longer fused with their I, the game ends. Western philosophy calls this detachment. Do not mistake it for apathy. It is lucid love. You can still care and understand, but you do not let love become chains. You can empathize with someone's pain without letting them use that pain to control you. You can listen, then stop where the line between me and you must hold. Psychologically, this is a crucial maturation. Differentiating responsibility. The super empath knows they are accountable only for their own actions and emotions, not for carrying someone else's chaotic inner world. Living by this principle deprives the narcissist of their strongest tool, blame shifting. In daily life, emotional detachment is crystal clear. When the narcissist punishes you with a day of silence, instead of spiraling, the super empath reads a book, takes a walk, spends time with themselves. When the narcissist stirs up drama, the super empath refuses the spiral and says, I'll talk when you're calmer. When accused, they don't rush to react. They answer, that's your perception, but it doesn't define me. These small acts are the narcissist's nightmare. They cast the bait no one bites. They set the trap no one steps in. They shout and hear only the echo of their own voice. For someone who lives on emotional control, this is total collapse. The miracle is that once the super empath learns emotional detachment, they not only protect themselves, they open a doorway to healing. When you stop letting others define your feelings, you also stop letting the past define your present. You begin to discern the voice of a wounded ego from the call of a soul longing for freedom. In that clarity, you find peace. That is why emotional detachment is a quiet yet devastating weapon against the narcissist. It isn't loud or flashy. It simply cuts off the energy stream that sustains them. And when that flow stops, the castle of illusion falls on its own. Part 8. The power of self-healing. If intuition is the lamp, powerful silence the fortress, boundaries the sword, and emotional detachment the shield, then self-healing is the lifeblood running beneath it all, nourishing every strength of the super empath. This is not merely a coping skill. It is a soul's pilgrimage, a deep process in which a person turns back to embrace the very wounds they once tried to deny. Narcissists survive by inflicting emotional injury. They plant doubt in you, sow guilt in you, and make you believe that you are the problem. Every lie, every silence, every devaluation is like a blade carving into your soul. For many victims, those cuts accumulate and never truly close. They carry them as hidden scars, living with the fear and obsession that the nightmare will repeat. But the super empath is different. They neither deny the wound nor allow it to bleed forever. They choose to face it. They sit with themselves in the dark nights, listening to the silent cries of the inner child, and slowly learn to say, "You were never wrong. You are already enough." That moment, the decision to hold themselves instead of rejecting themselves, is the turning point that transforms a victim into a healer. Self-healing for the super empath is not a quick remedy. It is like rain seeping into parched earth. They learn to forgive not the narcissist, but themselves for once believing they were unworthy. They learn to weep not from weakness, but because tears become a stream that cleanses the soul. They learn to write, to meditate, to listen to nature, all to restore the heart's natural rhythm that manipulation once choked. And here is what the narcissist cannot bear. The super empath does not need them in order to recover. Narcissists are used to victims staying bound, returning for answers, for recognition. But when the super empath learns to heal themselves, they enter a state of spiritual independence. They don't need an apology to be free. They don't need validation to know their worth. They don't need a happy ending to be whole. They find peace on their own. Jung's insight applies. I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. The super empath embodies this. They do not let wounds make them a permanent victim. They let wounds become seeds of wisdom. In the work of self-healing, they realize pain did not come to destroy it, came to awaken. One clear sign of self-healing is the calm that radiates from within. Those who were deeply hurt, once healed, carry a different energy. They don't need to prove or boast. Simply being around them makes you feel quieter, safer. It's because they have walked through the storm and found the still point at their center. That center becomes a guiding light for others. In everyday life, self-healing shows up in small, weighty choices. When the super empath spends an evening on self-care, instead of pleasing someone who never appreciates them, that is healing. When they write out their pain instead of swallowing it, that is healing. When they walk away from a toxic relationship without looking back, that is healing. Each act is a puzzle piece, gradually forming a complete picture, the picture of freedom. Ironically, this healing hurts the narcissist most. It proves that the narcissist's power was an illusion. They want to believe their wounds are permanent, that you will remember them as the one who controls your fate. But once you heal, you show they are nothing more than a chapter now closed, now past. Philosophically, self-healing is the reclamation of sovereign soulhood. When you let others decide when you may be happy or at peace, you have handed away your freedom. When you return to yourself tending, listening, you take back the guiding lamp. You become the author of your journey. And once your soul belongs to you again, no narcissist can touch it. The super empath self-healing is contagious in the best way. When one person heals, they open a path for others. They become a living proof. You can leave the dark. You can mend, however deep the wound. This is what narcissists never want, because this truth liberates not just one, but a whole community of survivors. Thus, self-healing is not merely a skill, it is a quiet revolution. It turns pain into light, victims into healers, darkness into lesson. For the narcissist, it is the end of the line. Once you learn to heal yourself, they have no power over you. Part 9. The Super Empath, a lantern for others. After all the inner journeys, after looking wounds in the eye, after tears have become a spring of wisdom, the Super Empath rises not only for themselves. They carry a greater gift, the capacity to become a lantern for others. Narcissists are practiced at sowing darkness. They isolate victims, making them believe they are alone, misunderstood, and loved only by the narcissist. It's their most effective strategy, planting the conviction that darkness is your destiny. But when the super empath steps into the light, they prove the opposite. No one is condemned to live in darkness forever. The super empath's very existence declares, I have walked that road. I know what the darkness is like, and I know there is a way out. By sharing their story, listening without judgment, and standing up for the vulnerable, they become living evidence of rebirth. What's special about this lantern is its quietness. The super empath does not need to play the public hero, or shout slogans, or display strength. They simply live truthfully, and that truth shines. In a world of deceit, authenticity has magnetic power. It makes those who suffer think, if they can do it, so can I. This is what the narcissist hates and fears most. One awakened person can leave, and the narcissist loses a supply. But one awakened person who helps others awaken threatens the entire system of deceit. Truth spreads. One flame can light 1,000 more. In the narcissist's world of darkness, just a few candles leave them with nowhere to hide. Eastern wisdom says, one candle loses nothing by lighting another. The super empath is that first candle, brave enough to blaze after the storm. They light others not by preaching, but by presence. Every story told, every boundary set, every proud, quiet act. These become inspiration for those still struggling in the dark. This lantern is both a light for the community and a reminder for the super empath themselves. They know they cannot save everyone, and they don't need to. They can light their own way, and in that light, the willing will find the path. Such is the humility of the lantern. It does not drag, it illumines. In practice, this is unmistakable. A friend once manipulated finds courage to leave after seeing you go. A co-worker sets their own boundaries after watching you refuse to be bullied. A family member rethinks their life when they see you choose healing over hatred. The super empath doesn't persuade. They inspire by living the truth. The deeper message is philosophical. Truth radiates beyond the individual. When you heal, you free yourself and open a passage for others. You become part of a collective current of healing, where one person's light strengthens many. This is what the narcissist cannot control, cannot extinguish, cannot break. Picture a narcissist standing in a dark room, confident everyone will keep believing their story. Then a small light appears. Not large, not blazing, but instantly the darkness trembles. Another light flares, then another, until the room is flooded, and the dark vanishes as if it never was. That is the resonant power the super empath brings. The super empath's lantern also reminds us of a vital truth. You are not alone. Darkness tells you that you're isolated, weak, not enough. But another's light awakens a deep memory in you that you, too, carry a lamp within. And when you trust that inner lamp, your own rebirth begins. For the narcissist, this is the bitterest defeat. They lose not only you, they lose the power to make you and others believe that darkness is everything. They watch the light spread, and in that light, their power dissolves. Part 10. Steadfast before the darkness. If the super empath's light can guide others, it is their steadiness before the darkness that forms the foundation of an untouchable presence. Light only truly matters when it is not snuffed out by the night. When a narcissist faces an awakened super empath, they rarely surrender easily. They will try everything. Pleading, sweet talk, smearing, threats, playing the victim, even reviving the original ideal love performance. All of it serves one aim, to crack that steadiness. They know that if the super empath wavers even once, a gap opens for them to slip through. It is precisely here that the super empath shines most. They have passed through the fire of betrayal and survived the abyss of self-doubt. What could possibly shake them now? This steadiness does not come from coldness, but from understanding. The super empath understands how the narcissist operates. They know apologies are performances, tears are tools, and rage is a tactic. With that clarity, they no longer need to react. They no longer hope to change the narcissist, nor do they fear their threats. They simply stand calm as a mountain, while the storm howls itself into silence. This steadiness also comes from befriending their own inner darkness. Before becoming a super empath, empaths often feared their unseemly emotions: anger, selfishness, the desire for recognition. They rejected those parts, which made them easy to manipulate. But once they learn to face and even embrace their inner shadow, it no longer controls them. So when the narcissist tries to use a mirror to reflect their supposed weakness back at them, they can smile and say, "I know, but that doesn't define me." Jungian philosophy calls this shadow integration. When you acknowledge your darkness, it stops being a weapon others can use to control you. Thus, the super empath stands firm not only before the narcissist, but before themselves. Imagine this scene. The narcissist returns bearing gifts and apologies. "I've changed, give me a chance." Once the empathic heart might have softened, hoping yet again. But the super empath no longer responds with naive faith. They don't need to shout, "You're a liar." They quietly say, "I trust actions, not words," and the actions are already clear. Then they walk away. That quiet resolve is enough to make the narcissist crumble. Steadfastness before the darkness has a communal impact as well. When one person stands firm, they open a path for others to do the same. In a family, when one super empath refuses to participate in cycles of silence, devaluation, and smearing, others begin to find the courage to leave them too. This power is not just personal, it catalyzes collective awakening. This is precisely what terrifies the narcissist. Once the super empath stands firm, truth ceases to be a private tale and becomes a shared reality. In the light of collective truth, darkness has nowhere left to hide. Eastern wisdom says, "Stillness overcomes turmoil." The super empath's steadfastness is that stillness. No confrontation, no counterattack, only standing in truth until every storm dissolves. In everyday life, this steadiness appears in small acts. Refusing to return to a toxic relationship despite begging, staying calm in a meeting when blamed, walking away from a pointless argument. Each act of steadiness proves darkness no longer holds power. Seeing this, the narcissist often escalates, shouting, smearing, seeking new supply to prove they're unaffected. But these are the death throes of a collapsing ego. Deep down they know, when a person no longer wavers, their power is over. Steadfast before the darkness, this is the super empath's voiceless, invincible strength. It needs no noise, no declaration, no proof. It only needs presence. In that presence, darkness retreats not because it was conquered, but because it no longer has ground to live on. Part 11, Living the Truth. Every action testifies to the light, no declarations needed. In the end, the super empath's deepest power lies less in words than in the way they live. For them, truth is not a slogan to hoist high, not a stirring manifesto, and certainly not a war over right and wrong. In the super empath's life, truth is a reality fully embodied in the smallest actions. Narcissists exist by deception. Therefore, they must constantly conceal. They say one thing and do another. They paint a perfect outer picture while remaining hollow within. The super empath is the opposite. They do not need to prove anything, so they have nothing to hide. They let truth flow naturally through every word, decision, and gesture of daily life. Consider a simple situation. The narcissist distorts a story to make you the culprit. You don't need to shout, "I'm not wrong." You simply keep living honestly. Keep your boundaries, keep acting in alignment with your values. Gradually the truth reveals itself. Words can be twisted, actions cannot. The super empath grasps a philosophical principle. Truth is not defended by argument, but by consistent action. When you live true to yourself, there is nothing left to prove. That very solidity terrifies the narcissist. They want to drag you into endless debate, but you decline. They want to cast you as the villain in others' eyes, but your steady kindness speaks more loudly than any defense. This is why the super empath brings peace to those around them. They make no grand promises, yet people trust them because they witness a rare coherence among word, action, and essence. In a world rife with contradiction and pretense, that coherence is light. Eastern wisdom teaches, the noble person does not proclaim their virtue. Their way of living makes it evident. So it is with the super empath. They need not declare, "I am strong" or "I am healed." They simply live truthfully, and that truth spreads like fragrance, unshowy, unmistakable. This further unnerves the narcissist. They live by image and require admiration to feel whole. Next to the super empath, they feel exposed not because they are criticized, but because the super empath's authenticity inadvertently highlights their pretense. As when a small candle is lit, hidden corners emerge and shadows lose their refuge. In practice, living the truth can be as simple as keeping your promises, even in small things, saying no when needed, without excuses, choosing silence when words would add to the chaos, choosing to leave an unhealthy relationship rather than staying out of fear. These acts may look small, but they are the embodiment of light. This light needs no fanfare. It exists in how you live and in the presence you carry. By living truth, the super empath delivers a message to others. You can live this way too. You don't need to play a role to be loved. You don't need to pretend to be accepted. You don't need to compromise with lies to keep the peace. If you dare to live honestly and be frank with yourself, truth becomes the strongest armor you'll ever wear. Here lies the paradox that drives the narcissist to fury. The super empath doesn't need to prove anything, and yet they keep prevailing. They don't counterattack yet, their very presence is resistance. They don't shout yet others recognize their light. The narcissist, however loudly they scream, only exposes their own falsehood. Spiritually, living the truth is a returning to essence. When you live true, you are no longer ruled by external needs, nor afraid of losing approval. You stand firm in yourself, and that is the highest freedom. Thus, living the truth is not only the super empath's power, it is a message for us all. Light does not compete for space. It merely appears, and the darkness dissolves on its own. Part 12. Transcending the loop, no longer needing to prove anything. One of the most insidious traps a narcissist lays is not just in lies or manipulation, it is in the proving loop. They push their victims into a constant state of proving. Proving they are good enough, proving they are worthy of love, proving they are not wrong, proving they still have value. And in this endless race, the victim's energy is drained dry. Before awakening, even the super empath once fell into this loop. They once wept silently, trying to prove their love was real. They once exhausted themselves, trying to prove they could fix the relationship. They once sacrificed and strove for perfection to prove they weren't useless, despite the narcissist's cruel accusations. But then came the painful truth. Every attempt to prove only fed the narcissist's game. After walking through devastation, the super empath enters a completely different state transcendence from the loop. They no longer feel any need to prove anything. Not to the narcissist, not to the world, not even to themselves. This is a rare spiritual strength. Most humans live hungry for recognition, but after reaching the depths of manipulation, the super empath realizes worth does not rest in another's gaze, but in the authenticity of one's own being. Picture this. The narcissist returns and sneers, "You're nothing without me." Once you might have scrambled to prove them wrong, but now you simply smile. "I don't need to prove anything." That answer drives the narcissist mad, because it signals the game is over. This transcendence also shows in daily life. The super empath no longer proves strength by posturing. They allow themselves to be vulnerable when needed, knowing true strength lies not in never falling, but in rising each time they do. They no longer prove happiness with glamorous images. They find joy in simple moments. A quiet morning, a hot cup of tea, a genuine smile. This philosophy brings them close to absolute freedom. When you no longer need to prove, you are no longer bound by judgment. Praise does not intoxicate you. Criticism does not shatter you. You listen, but you are not defined by outer voices. You live simply because you live. This leaves the narcissist utterly powerless. Their entire strategy depends on creating lack, forcing you to prove yourself to fill the void. But when you no longer feel lacking, when you become whole, their games collapse into meaninglessness. They have nothing left to cling to. Look closely. The super empath does not transcend by denying the past. They don't pretend they were never hurt. They carry scars, but not as proof of weakness, rather as marks of growth. That is why they no longer need to prove. A scar already testifies on its own. No explanation required. In Eastern philosophy, this state can be called Wu Zheng non-contending. No more striving, no more winning or losing, not because victory is impossible, but because the need to win has dissolved. Not because they fear defeat, but because victory and defeat have lost meaning. The super empath at this stage no longer gets pulled into cycles of confrontation. They know the narcissist may scream, may stage dramas, but these are only ripples on the lake's surface. Beneath, the water remains still. In practice, this transcendence appears in simple ways. When someone smears you, you don't run around explaining. You know truth will speak in time. When someone compares you to belittle you, you don't react. You smile, knowing you are not a number in their scoreboard. When someone drags you into drama, you choose to walk away instead of fight. Each act may seem small, but each is an expression of freedom, and that freedom is what the narcissist will never have. Thus, transcending the loop is not about defeating someone, it is about ending the game. Not about proving you are stronger, but about no longer needing to prove at all. This is the pinnacle of the super empath's journey, the moment they step out of the narrow prison of manipulation and into the vast sky of truth. When we look back over the entire journey, it becomes clear. The super empath is neither a supernatural figure nor some distant legend. They are living proof of the hidden strength within the human spirit, a strength that can rise even when we thought we had been defeated forever. There was a time when they were fragile souls, crushed by cruelty, manipulated until they lost themselves. They endured long nights of tears, where each drop felt as if it erased the meaning of life itself. They once believed lies, endured power games, and spun helplessly in the cycle of proving and sacrificing without end. Yet from that abyss, a new seed of life sprouted, the seed of rebirth. The super empath learned to see through illusions with intuition, refusing to be lulled by false promises. They chose the power of silence over draining reactions. They built inviolable boundaries, not from anger, but from self-respect. They revealed truth, not for revenge, but for liberation. They detached emotions, so as not to be dragged into the blame game. They healed, so their wounds no longer defined them. They radiated light, becoming a lantern for others. And finally, they transcended the proving loop, choosing to live freely unbound by the gaze or judgment of anyone. This carries a profound philosophical truth. Light does not come from outside. It is awakened from within. A narcissist may take away love, trust, even hope, but they can never take away the seed of light within each soul. The super empath is proof. When that seed is nurtured with steadfastness, with the courage to embrace pain instead of fleeing from it, it will sprout, grow, and become an unquenchable flame. And here lies the most important truth. The super empath is not some chosen elite handpicked by the universe. They can be anyone, you, me, the one hearing these words. For the journey of becoming a super empath does not begin with strength, but with weakness. Not with glory, but with wounds. The moment you dare to face your wound, dare to embrace the abandoned child within, dare to whisper, "Enough," you have already taken your first step on that path. The super empath is not a destination, but a process. That process may be slow, may be filled with trials, but every step carries meaning. Each time you say no to manipulation, you move forward. Each time you choose silence over argument, you move forward. Each time you place your hand on your heart and say, "I am enough," you move forward. And one day when you look back, you realize you are no longer a victim, you have become a beacon. For the narcissist, this is the ultimate defeat. They not only lose control over you, but are forced to face an undeniable truth that even within the darkness they spread, light can still rise. And once lit, that light does not shine for one alone, it spreads to many. So, if you are hearing these words, remember, The journey of the Super Empath can also be your journey. You do not need to prove anything to anyone. You do not need to strain to become a perfect version of yourself. You only need the courage to live authentically, to set boundaries, to guard your inner peace. In doing so, you not only free yourself, but also become part of the flowing current of light in this world. Let every step you take be proof that truth always wins. Let every silence you keep be evidence that peace is stronger than chaos. Let every boundary you set be a declaration that you are worthy. And let every breath remind you, you are no longer the hunted. You have become the light. And that light once lit will never go out.